Hey there, and welcome to Ruck Up Buttercup, the podcast that's all about real talk for military spouses and families. I'm Sabrina, and we're so glad you're here.
And I'm Ashley, and together we dive into the ups, the downs, and everything in between that comes with military life. From deployment tips to marriage conversations to PCS chaos, finding your identity and owning it, nothing is off limits.
And I'm Laura. Whether you're folding uniforms, packing boxes, managing the home front, solo, or just trying to make it through another long week, you're in the right place. Here on Ruck Up Buttercup, we share real stories, honest conversation, and practical support for military families.
We talk about the hard stuff, the hopeful stuff, and everything in between. Because military life is anything but one size fits all.
This is a space to feel seen, supported, and reminded that you're never alone in this journey.
So lace up those boots, lift your chin, and let's ruck up Buttercup. Military life doesn't define us. We rise in.
You can also hear us on Wreath Across America Radio on Women in Media Wednesdays at 11 p.m. See you there.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so I'm so excited for today's episode. I have been waiting for this episode for, I feel like, forever. I dug around and found someone who would come on and talk to us about Space A. If you don't know what that is, you're going to learn today. It's really exciting. It's a great resource to use. I'm kind of kicking myself in the butt for not utilizing it more as a military spouse. But today we have Allison Beverly joining us. And she is a military spouse, a mom of 6. Was that correct?
Yes.
6 who homeschools, and she loves to travel. And she's going to share us all of her wisdom about how to use Space A. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here for sure.
So why don't we first start off and tell us a little bit about yourself, about your guys' military journey and how you became kind of this, a little bit of expert on how to use Space A and how you guys have utilized it.
Sure. Okay. So my husband's been in for 14 years, active duty. We're on our 10th duty station. And I started looking into Space A. I had heard about it early on in our military journey. But the first 8 years or so, we ended up having 6 kids and 3 deployments to Afghanistan. So didn't really have a lot of time to explore it. It was just kind of in the research stage at that point. And then, as kind of life settled down a little bit, we tipped to, he's a foreign area officer now. So we've got a kind of not real army gig going on where it's not quite as much family separation. So we decided it would be a great time to start really diving into exploring what Space A could do for us. And since we've moved to our current duty station about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we've traveled Space A 3 times to Europe. So we've had a great time. And I definitely want to share what I've learned over those 10 years of research and what we've since learned actually doing it a few times with everyone else, because I really do think it's a very underutilized benefit that we have. That's actually not as scary as I think people tend to think it is.
Yeah. So we've said this word, like, before we get too far, we've said the word Space A 100 times, but I feel like there's going to be some new spouses who don't even know what we're talking about at this point. So do you want to go ahead and kind of tell us like what the concept of Space A is first, before we get too far into like how to use it or like how the benefits?
Of course, sure. So Space A flight stands for Space Available Flights, and you'll sometimes hear them called military hops. That's a common nickname, I guess, for them. But basically it's when a military mission is going somewhere and there's extra seats on the plane that aren't being used, they'll open them up to any eligible military member, or in some cases, military spouses and dependents. And important thing to remember is it's always going to be based on a mission. So you're not going to be able to just go anywhere anytime you want. You've got to find a military mission that's going where you want to go and then contact them and try to get on that flight. So
it's a great way to just travel. I know I said a little bit ago that, I really have kind of kicked myself in the butt for not utilizing Space A. But as a kid growing up, we utilized Space A quite often. When we were living overseas, we used it often to come home and go back and forth. And so I remember vividly sitting on a C-17 and flying across to Germany, and was just like, this is the craziest experience, but it was so much fun. And it is a really inexpensive way to travel if you're wanting to go places and you have the time and you can do all the things. So we'll dive into like how that's going to look here in a minute. So Alyson, so you have been doing this for a little while. In the last 18 months, you've done 3 times to Europe. What is the very first thing that we as military spouses should do if we're thinking of utilizing Space A? So what are your like number one tricks to, like, when you are thinking about it, what should you do first?
I mean, the first thing you need to do for sure is make sure you actually understand how it works. It's not just as simple as showing up somewhere and getting on a plane. You've got to research which have flights to where you want to go. You've got to learn how to read their flight schedules, learn how to sign up. So there's a lot of background work that goes into it. But I think sometimes we get in this conundrum where we either have to pay a lot and get a good, like, have an easy experience, or we have to do a little extra work in order to make it affordable. And this is definitely going to require extra work, but the payoff is well worth it for sure. So I also think you need to understand on military flights, especially the cargo flights, there's 2 basic types of military flights for Space A. You have your Patriot Express, and then you have cargo flights. And the Patriot Express is going to be more like what you would experience on a regular commercial airline, where you're going to have the big plane with your 2 hot meals served to you as you cross the ocean, and your nice bathroom, and you can recline your seat, and you have your little digital display. And then you've got your cargo flights, which is going to be the complete opposite. You're going to be lucky if there's actually a physical seat to sit in. You might be rolling out some little sleeping mats. There's not going to be running water in the bathroom, so you're going to bring some hand sanitizer. They're definitely not going to provide you with hot food. So they're very different experiences, the 2 different types of Space A flights. So also just being prepared and knowing what you're getting into before you hop on there. So
yeah, because I would definitely be packing snacks and like all the other things, especially on those European trips. But also kind of nice on those European trips, because that is a long flight.
It is.
To like lay out and have a little bit more comfort isn't a bad thing either. So it definitely is a different experience.
Yeah, we were not prepared for the C-17 flight because we initially had done a hop over, and we were on a Patriot Express. So we were actually on a plane that had like seats. And the second time we did it was a C-17. I mean, we were sitting in like the little seats that you see like in, you know, military movies, like before they jump out of the airplane, like kind of strapped in. I had flip-flops on. I had just thin leggings on. I was freezing. Thankfully, a soldier took pity on my, you know, teenage self and gave me his extra sleeping mat. And I just remember like trying to like wrap up in this thin blanket to not shiver. So you definitely want to like dress in layers, you know, make sure you prepare for which flight it is, because it is a very different experience. It is, you know, if you have kids, you obviously want to have things to keep them entertained, because there's not going to be, you know, entertainment on, you know, the C-17s or whatever type of plane it is. And then at the same time, snacks and all that kind of stuff. So for those, I think we've talked about this on an episode or 2. Like, for those that don't know, I am planning to do Space A here in May to go over to Europe. And so this is why I was really excited to have someone come on to kind of help talk us through all the things. So we're figuring out figuring out what it looks like. The next step would probably be to like, you know, figure out what the closest
terminal
port or terminal
closest
is.
terminal.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the Patriot Express flights really only fly out of Baltimore, Washington, and SeaTac. So you're going to have a way better chance at experiencing Space A if you're on the East Coast or the West Coast. All of us, or those stationed in this middle of the country, maybe wait till you're at a duty station on the end, or be prepared to, you know, get yourselves to a coast for sure. But gray tails, or, you know, the military cargo flights, they will go out of any base. Mm-hmm. The most frequent bases for your overseas destinations are, again, going to be on the coast. You're rarely going to see a flight to Germany or to Japan from the middle of the country. Yeah. But you can find flights occasionally from the middle of the country to Travis in California, which then you can move on to Asia or up to Dover or McGuire, or sometimes even Norfolk here on the East Coast that you can get to Europe through. So just knowing the bases for sure, and knowing that you're really being Army is a little unfortunate in this circumstance because the flights typically go out of Air Force and naval bases because we don't have the planes. So you got to be prepared to get to a Navy base or an Air Force base to take advantage of Space A.
Right. And so then the next kind of thing is, and I think this one's probably the most complicated for military spouses to understand, is the priorities, like how knowing like whether you'll be a first priority or the last priority when they're choosing people to get on those flights.
Yeah. So the way that they divvy up the seats on Space A flights is a category system. You've got category 1 through category 6. And most of us are going to fall into the category 3 or 4 or 5 as active duty spouses. Category 6 is the retirees, which all of us are going to want to pay attention to, because if you retire with 20 years, you can fly Space A anytime you want. So start looking into it now, even if it's not an option for you on your active duty time frame. But category 1 is just non-funded emergency leave. So you're really only going to mostly running into that when someone's stationed overseas and like a parent dies back in the States and they need to get back and it's not funded. That would be Cat 1. Category 2 is going to be, again, for families stationed overseas who get that environment and morale leave that and are traveling with their spouse. That's category 2. And then category 3 is active duty leave with your spouse. So you decide to go on a family vacation, you're going to be category 3. Category 4 is going to be your dependence of when your service member is deployed for over 30 days. You're going to be able to fly with a deployment verification letter. And that's going to be mainly your category 4s. It's also going to be families stationed overseas who decide just to come back, but not with their spouse on environmental morale leave. So if you're flying without your spouse from overseas, you're going to be a Cat 4. Cat 5, I think is probably what you're going to be looking into, Ashley, is when you've got your spouse stationed overseas and you're not there with them, but you're either command or non-command sponsored. You can fly with a command sponsored memo, which I can tell you guys how to get, and go overseas and travel to where your spouse is located. And then, like I said, category 6 is going to be your retirees. But your selection within the category is not based on rank, nothing like that. It's just based on the earliest you signed up to try to catch a flight. So the very earliest sign up is going to be the first one within that category to be selected to get on the plane.
Yeah, the selection process is different. I was going to say, you also have to be prepared on that, on both ends, depending on which way you're going, to have a hotel lined up, have situations, because we were stuck in Maryland waiting for, we were PCSing, so we were a higher priority, but we still were stuck in Maryland for 3 days. And so do know that there are chances that you will not get on a flight, even if you are a high priority, because there's just so many spaces. And there are the people, if you didn't sign up first, that are going to get those spots before you.
Yeah. So how early can you sign up? Like, so let's just talk about, let's say for BWI. So Baltimore, they put their flights up 30 days in advance. So that's one of the locations that doesn't. Most others don't. It's like the week of, or depending on the location. How early can you sign up for the flights?
So signing up is also going to depend on your category. So for category 3, when you're traveling with your spouse on leave, you cannot sign up for a flight until your spouse is already on leave. Yeah. So for us in the Army, that's going to be midnight, the day of leave starting is the very earliest you can sign up. Navy does it a little bit different. I think they can do it from the end of duty day, the previous day. So they can sign up like 4 o'clock on the day before their leave actually starts. But everybody else, it's going to be midnight. And then if you're category 4, 5, or 6, you can sign up about 60 days in advance is the maximum. But you want to keep in mind that once that 60-day hits, you just drop off the sign up and you're starting over again at 1 day out. So the best advice that I've read everywhere of the retirees that use this is you want to, like, that sweet spot's about 45 days. You want to sign up about 45 days before you're planning to travel. And then you've got some wiggle room if you don't make a flight because other priority higher categories have taken those seats. You've got a little bit of wiggle room to still get on the plane before that 60-day window is up. And I also, encourage everybody with this mindset too, go ahead and sign up for your return trip that first day of leave, or as soon as you sign up for your outgoing trip, because then when you're coming back, you're going to be a higher priority on the list to get back as well. And if you're active duty, your sign up is good as long as your leave lasts. So from midnight, that first minute that leave starts, all the way until your leave ends, your sign up remains.
Yeah, and this can be a huge like cost saving option as well. And like,
Yeah.
but I would definitely recommend having that money available, because there are going to be times where you're like, we have to be back, leave is up, we have to be back, and you're going to have to buy your own flights home. I've seen it happen, and it's not fun. Like, that's when you're like, oh, we're going to be able to just jump on this plane and we're going to be able to go, and it doesn't work out that way. So make sure you're not just jumping on a plane to another country and not having enough funds to get yourself home, because that is not going to be a situation you want to be in.
Yeah. We tell everyone that takes our class, definitely have an emergency fund, and we allow a buffer of 3 days on either end before 3 days of leave before we actually want to get there, and then 3 days to get home. Start trying to get on a plane 3 days before leave ends. And we've been very fortunate, even our family needing 8 seats, we've been able to get on every flight that we plan to get on, both directions, every single time. So it is possible. A hint you mentioned earlier, Sabrina,
it comes down to that planning, right? Like just knowing where you're most likely to get out of.
Mm-hmm. Well, the trick is being flexible, right? Yeah. So say you really want to get on that Patriot Express out of BWI, but a flight pops up out of Dover the day before, and maybe you just drive up there and deal with a cargo flight. There's actually this like sub economy of retirees that like cater to space age traveling. So we've actually utilized a guy out of Dover, and he's made this retiree gig out of driving people between all the space age terminals in the Northeast. So you fly out of one and need to fly back to the other, he'll meet you there and drive you back to your car. So there is a way to work around, being flexible. They will help you be flexible. So it's doable for sure. And then I was going to say, Sabrina, you mentioned earlier the difficulty, even when you were Space R on that flight for the Patriot Express, having to wait 3 days. You're going to be the most successful with Space A, not only being flexible in the ways we talked about, but also being more flexible on when you travel. So being a homeschool family, we're not traveling during peak PCS seasons. It's going to be really difficult anytime between late May to mid-August to get on a flight, because the space required families that they're PCSing overseas are going to take most of those flights and seats, and they're not going to release as many for Space A. And then all the Space Airs who wanted those flights are going to be going to get on the cargo flights. So there's higher competition for the cargo flights as well. So if you're able to plan your vacations off season, that's going to give you a way better chance at being successful.
Because that definitely was the issue. We moved in the middle of summer and it was chaos. So you're definitely going to have that during PCS season. I mean, and I feel like any traveling, it's funner to do when it's off season, because we've learned that even living on the East Coast, like Myrtle Beach was our favorite place to go in the winter because there's nobody there. You can go to everything really quickly. So like, do plan that. Like, yes, it's really fun to go to Germany in Christmas time, right? Because who doesn't want to go to the Christmas markets? However, maybe we go in fall before that happens, and there's going to be a lot less people traveling at the time. So like, yeah, you have to be flexible about when you go, because there's priorities of things that you may want to see at certain times, but some of those things are just as equally cool at other times, and you may find something that you love. So like, be flexible so that you can actually have a good experience, and you're not going to be stuck in a foreign country or something trying to get back.
For sure. And if you can work around the DoD school schedule, everybody tries to take the spring break trip and the fall break trip and the Christmas break trip. So if you can, we were actually very successful in doing a Christmas market trip, but we left December 5th, not December 18th. So you can do it. It's just, again, work around those schedules as much as you can.
For sure.
And then have the flexibility that if you're going to choose to go during that time frame that you may have to stick around longer. And if that's not feasible, having that backup budget. So we thankfully are homeschooling too, and I work from home. So like we have that flexibility that may not be the best time frame for us, or at least coming home may not be the best time frame for us to go. But with, my husband's work schedule and stuff like this is where that trip lined up. And I just have like, okay, if we are stuck in K-Town for a few days, that's fine. Kaiserslautern Ramstein, my old stomping grounds, I was there for 4 years. So I was like, I'll just show the kids where I spent 5 years of my youth and have that backup. But, I think that's really great when you don't have the cost of thousands of dollars to purchase a commercial flight. You can use that, covering hotel costs and things like that on the other end. And I'm super excited. I was super nervous deciding to do this because I'm traveling solo, so I won't have an extra pair of hands. And at first I was like, I don't know if this is worth it. Like, I think for my mental health, like this is just going to be too much. But as I was reading through, there's so many sites out there where you can get advice. Again, I think we talk about this all the time. Like, make sure you do your own research on it and make sure that it is legit advice, because anyone can say this is how it is. But, you know, do your research. There are some really great organizations, and there's two that I wanted to touch on today, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. But having just the information, knowing where you're going, knowing where you can come back, and then having those plans of how to get from point A to point B if you have to come into a different location, because you're not guaranteed to be able to fly back to the same place that you left. Which I feel like if you're going to Germany, I feel like almost everything out of Germany is from Ramstein is just a BWI. Majority of them are. So, I mean, obviously there's going to be those like off chances of going somewhere else. Like, I was super excited to see that they opened back up the Charlotte terminal. Mm-hmm. But I have to call them this week because I was like, I'm curious on like what their flights and stuff are, because I don't have them listed. But I was like, oh, that would be so much better. But then I'm like, oh, but like, will we be able to get back to Charlotte, or will I have to go to BWI and then rent a car or get a last minute flight back? So there's all those different things you have to think about. But at the same time, I'm really excited for this adventure. Like, my kids are going to get to fly potentially on a military plane. They're going to get to, you know, they're so excited that we get to go in a taxi and a train and all these different things, because we plan on taking the train from Germany to Poland. And so they're just really excited to get to go on all these modes of transportation that we don't really get to do here in the U.S. often. So I think it's just a really fun way to have just a really fun adventure as well.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
For homeschooling, you can teach them all about all the different modes of transportation. It's a great lesson.
Yes.
So let's say you have a ticket, you know that you've got a spot. What does that day of arriving at the terminal, like, how is that all going to go? You talked about like specific forms we need to bring and paperwork and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So the first thing is, like, unless you're space required, you're not going to get a ticket. So when you sign up for Space A, you're signing up to take any flight from the United States to any country that you list on. So we can talk a little bit more about how you sign up if you guys think that would be helpful. The official website for Space A travel is amc.af.mil. That's the Air Mobility Command. The Air Force runs the whole shebang. That's the official site. And once you go to the main page of this Space A page of that site, there'll be instructions for email sign up. About halfway down the page, it'll tell you all the information you need to list on your sign up request form. And you'll email each specific terminal that you might fly into. You will list on that in that email, and also make sure you list yourself so you have a copy of that, because that's the way that they're going to figure out who signed up first, is a time-stamped copy of the email that you sent to register. So you're going to want to make sure that you have that with you. You're also going to want to make sure that you have your command or non-command sponsored verification letter or your deployment verification letter. Links to both of those forms are also on that main amc.af.mil site in a links section on the far left-hand side or right-hand side. And the full DODI guidelines for Space A, it's an 80-page document or so. There's a link to that too. So if you want to read it yourself and figure out every little nitty-gritty thing, you can access that as well on that page. You can also find on that page links to each terminal. That's how you're going to find out the flight schedules. So once you've signed up to fly, you're just signed up to leave the US and go to whatever country you listed, Germany, UK, Italy, whichever ones you list. And then it's up to you to figure out when those flights are leaving. Nobody's going to call you and say, now there's a flight. Mm-hmm. It's up to you to track those flights on your own from those links on that AMC webpage. And we talked a little bit about the PE versus the cargo flights. The PE flights are going to list their schedule by the month. So a couple days before the new month, the 28th, 29th, they're going to post their schedule for the following month. And it's going to only tell you the date and the location that the flights are going. You're not going to figure out what time. You're not going to figure out how many seats. All that's on that 30-day schedule is the date and the location. Then the 72 hours out is when they're going to post for the cargo flights, as well as post the exact time to show up and the number of seats they're going to release for that Patriot Express flight. So 3 days out is as early as you're going to figure out that information before your flight leaves. So once you have decided, I found this flight going out of BWI, the roll call time is 14:45. You're going to want to make sure that you're showing up for that roll call time between 30 minutes and 3 hours before the actual time listed, and that's going to vary depending on terminal. So when you look at each individual terminal's webpage, it's going to give you the time they recommend before roll call to show up. Roll call is when the manifest is finalized and they start checking in your bags. So if you haven't checked in at the ticket counter before that time and gotten all of your information processed, you're not eligible for that flight. So don't think 14:45 means walk in the door at that time. You need to have been there at least an hour before, probably, maybe even more. If you're flying out of a naval base, we've found out that the Navy doesn't really pay attention to the roll call. It's just as soon as you get there, they're going to give you a ticket.
In general, it's the military, guys, and we know the military doesn't really adhere to timelines. So, like, you're better off being there way early in case they decide to move that up for whatever reason, or if it's pushed back. Like, you're there and like, bring games and stuff. Like, I don't know, my experience, military doesn't adhere to timelines. So like, don't go based off of that. Like, be as early as you can.
Expect to sit there in the terminal for a while. We sat out in a line. Luckily, ours was right next to the USO, so they were bringing out Girl Scout cookies and things to like keep people entertained. But you will sit there for a while.
And 14:45 doesn't mean they're going to take your bags and you get on the plane. You're going to sit for at least 3 or 4 hours after that time before your plane actually leaves, if you're lucky. Sometimes longer.
And then even if that is when you leave, like, that's again like another like thing you have to think about. Like, you could get on the flight, all the things, and then it still won't leave. Like, I know that happened to us one time. Thankfully, we were able to get on the next one, but like, it's one of those things where it's just so much flexibility, and you have to have that whole mindset of, you know, why is that another one?
Like the adventure. Like,
I mean, you just have to go in going like, it could be a stressful day. You're going to have kids. Like, why are we still sitting here? Especially if you are traveling with kids, you know, all the different things. So like, you know, if you go in with a mindset of, this is going to be a long day. How can I make it a little less stressful? What can I do? I know another tip that I've heard people all over the place say, don't leave the terminal once you get on that list, even if you know it's going to be 3 hours, because again, it's the military, y'all. And they could be like, hey, we're ready to rock and roll, load up and let's go. And you decided to go back to the hotel or go out to eat or something. So there has to be a lot of like pre-planning for this, like having the snacks, having all the different things, and being ready to go at any notice.
I think what we didn't talk about, like why there's probably these delays, is also OPSEC. So like, make sure you're keeping OPSEC while you're in line waiting too, because it's just like any other operation with the military. It's not going to take off if everybody knows the exact time. Like there are still military members going on a mission on that plane that you're getting into. So you need to be very observant of that. Is probably a lot of why there's delays and why there's wait time, because they don't want to tell everybody exactly when they're taking off. That's not how the military works. So keep your OPSEC as well. Like, maybe just text your family, but don't be posting anything on social media that you got a flight or anything like that.
Good advice for sure.
So forms, we were talking about that, and you said that to get to certain categories, you will need specific forms. Are there any, and like, how do we access like getting those things, either from our military member if we're traveling to them, or from our command locally if we need to do so?
Right. So the forms you're going to need for sure, if you're traveling with your kids and they don't yet have a military ID, you need a copy of their DEERS paperwork, which is your DD 1172. And that's going to just prove that they have eligibility under your sponsor to fly Space A.
See, and I didn't know that.
Yep. So you need a copy of that DD 1172, and that does, no matter what category you're in. If you have a kid, even if you're retired and have a kid, you have to have that DD 1172 form. For any child under 14, children 14 and up are required to fly with their military ID. They won't let them on the plane without it. So make sure you've got that military ID. Your deployment verification letter, like I said earlier, the links to all these forms are going to be on the AMC website about halfway down the page in a little box on the right. What your sponsor's command is going to need to sign each and every one of these forms. It'll be up to you to print them out, fill them out, and then get them signed. And then you have to carry them with you to the terminal. So make sure if you're visiting a spouse overseas that you've emailed that form to them ahead of time. They've gotten it signed, scanned it back in, sent it back to you, because you've got to have that to check in for your flight. Those, if you're going overseas, obviously you're going to need your passport and a visa if applicable. The other thing you're going to need if you're traveling Category 3 with your spouse is you have to have a copy of their leave form with you. So when you go to sign in at the desk, they're going to look at that time-stamped email of when you signed up, and they're going to look at the email at the copy of the leave form, and they're going to make sure those dates match up. And if they don't, your sign up won't be valid, and they'll have to restart it right there at the gate. So they will ask you for that form. I would recommend bringing a physical copy and having an email, because depending on the terminal, some want the hard copy and some point to an email address stuck onto the counter and say, email it here. So make sure you have the option to do both. You're also going to want to make sure you have both cash and a credit card the day of. Some terminals are cash only, some terminals are card only, and unless you've done a lot of preparation, you might not know which terminal you end up going out of that day if you're willing to be flexible. So make sure you have both things. But yes, those forms are going to have to be filled out by your sponsor and then signed by their command in order to be valid forms. Does that answer your question, Sabrina?
Yeah. And I think, and cash is a really, really good idea. Also, especially if you're going to Europe, a lot of places in Europe only take cash. So make sure that you are prepared. I would definitely do that on this side. You're going to get major ATM fees on the other side, especially if you're not. I think if you're stationed there, a lot of that you can work through like Navy Federal or whatever the difference is. But if you're not stationed there, you need to know that the ATM fees are high in Europe. And so I would bring Euro with you. So that
I definitely recommend as soon as you get off the plane at whatever US base you're at, you go to the PX and find the ATM, and because you're not going to get the fees on the US base either. So make sure you're doing that too, because get a lot
more than you expect. I think because sometimes in Europe you're just going to be surprised. You'll go into a grocery store and they'll be like, no card, and you're like, but I need all these groceries, and so you need to have cash. We've gone into restaurants that you would highly expect would take card and had to walk blocks. Like my husband had to leave us in a sushi restaurant and he had to walk blocks away to find an ATM to get cash to pay because she wouldn't let us leave without paying in cash. So Europe's different. If you haven't been there, make sure you're prepared for cash, because it's definitely still one of their big things there.
Yeah, I would say same for Asia. If you're going overseas, have the cash. So
like America has made it very convenient with everything. It's just tap and go. You can pay from your phone half the time, but it's not always the case in other countries. So
very true. Very true.
Well, Ashley, do you want to kind of talk about some of the resources you know of?
Yeah. So I think, like two of the ones that I've come across that I know a lot of other people recommend. So the first one is Popping Smoke. She has a great blog. She has it broken down. We'll link the stuff, but there's a lot of great information. It's a great page to follow if you guys are looking or just starting the journey of how to do space A. She's got a free guide on there as well that you can download, and it will just kind of walk you through everything. And I feel like she does a really, really good job at kind of breaking things down, not to dumbify it for us military spouses, but to kind of break it out of that very military grade form, which I will say I looked at recently and I was like, this is just, it's a lot to take in, and it can be really overwhelming. And so if you're wanting to kind of bypass that and just kind of get the gist of it, and then, information, it's a great page to go check out. I love how she has it broken down to some of the larger terminals and like what you can expect there, whether you can get a rental car, whether there's parking, all that. So she does a really, really good job at doing that. The other one is, and this is very new, so I don't even know if Alyssa, you know about this yet, but I had the privilege of speaking to a gentleman who has created a program that takes all the information on the website that Alyssa was telling us about, because that's all in different spots. So like, it's not that the military site for me can be very overwhelming, because you have to go to each terminal and look at each thing separately. It's not kind of like all in one concise location. You have to go to each one separately. And so this gentleman, he's active duty. He would have been on the call today, but he is on a TDY right now. So he has created this program called Ebby Travels. There is free portion and paid portion, but he has created this program where it's pulling this information every 2 hours from the sites. And it is kind of a one-stop shop where, like, if you're looking for flights, you can just go in, put all the different locations that you want, and it will pull those flights. You can set it up to email you. I think on the paid version, You can do signups through it too. Like there's a direct link to do
That's
all
free
that.
too, actually. The signups are also free.
Yeah. So everything's there. You can do the member exclusive thing on here for 45 days for free. So even if you want to use it the one time to kind of track the flights and do all the different things, like it's really cool. I've been kind of playing around with it, and you know, it's just really nice to have everything in one spot without all of the unnecessary stuff that you may not need if you're just looking at the flight like schedule. So this is more just the scheduling portion. It doesn't include like all the information about the rules and things like that. You'll still want to go and determine like, you know, that terminal, like, okay, like what time should I be there? What else would I need if there's a specific request from that terminal? But this one will break it down to, okay, I am looking at flying from the East Coast to Germany. I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to select that I want it to send me an update anytime a flight is added. And you, like I said, it updates. Actually, I'm sorry. I said 2 hours. It's updated every 20 minutes. So every 20 minutes it's updated. It's, I think, a really great program. He launched it in October, I think.
It was September. And
September, yeah.
Like, we've had my husband and I also did a walkthrough of the site with him. It is fantastic. One of my favorite things is he has all the historical information about once the flights left, how many seats they released, what category down they accepted people on. And that's extremely helpful if you're trying to plan a space age trip, to know what you're kind of somewhat get a prediction of what your chances are of making that flight. Mm-hmm. And that's the game changer. Not only is it just, that's a service you can't get from the AMC site. They only leave up their history a week out. And so this history has been saved since the launch of the site. So you can really actually get a pretty accurate picture of how many seats are being released on these flights. But yeah, that's a great site.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because I can help you kind of just gauge and track. Like, you know, that's kind of where my deciding factor of going to BWI was. Like, we're all the way in Georgia, but I was like, you know, I have a much better chance of getting out of BWI, and I know I will be able to get back to BWI rather than going out of Charleston or Travis. Was it Travis? So like, I know that there's a better chance. So like, I've made a decision that we're just going to take a road trip and we'll drive up to BWI. You know, we'll go to museums if we have to be up there for a few days. And then if we get on a flight, great. If we don't get on that flight, thankfully that one, they have flights once a week or twice a week, depending on the week. So it's much more likely for us to get out. And we have that opportunity because we have that flexibility. But I know that's not going to be the case for everybody. Like, you may only be able to, you know, drive to the next state over. But there's just having these tips and tricks and all these different things, I think, are really great. And like, and speaking of like tips and tricks, like, you know, we have these kind of helping us plan. There's so many Facebook groups, guys. Like, there's so many. I mean, that's how I found Alyssa, because I was just like, I need someone. Please come share your knowledge. And I will say that my only kind of ick about, it's not even an ick, but I do feel like some of our retirees are a little too blunt for my liking, and they're just like very direct and very, I don't know how to explain it, but sometimes they can come over very passive aggressive. And so just remember, there's a lot of retirees, a lot of older people in there that are maybe social media challenged, and so they don't know how etiquette and things like that. So just keep that in mind. Like, if you get a response from someone, it's probably not intentional, that they're kind of being
I think you're being very kind. That was my experience too.
I'm trying not to be like, oh, you're being jerks, but
I quickly realized what it actually is. It's like gatekeeping of the information, because any active duty people that fly, you're taking their seats. Mm-hmm. And so they try to answer in a way that's discouraging because they don't want that competition. I mean, there'll be times when we walk into a terminal and we see the retirees count us and they just go, oh, because they know they're not getting on because we just brought 8 people in to catch a plane that's releasing 9 seats. So there's a lot of gatekeeping with the Space A information. And I've gotten a lot of very discouraging responses, people telling me, oh, that's never going to work with your group size, blah, blah. And like I said, we've been extremely successful every single time we've tried. So do take what they say with a grain of salt. Just reiterating, that's definitely a problem on the Space A sites. I want to add too, like the best Facebook page that I found that really gave me the confidence to do Space A was the Space A Adventures US Trip Reports. And it's where people get on and say, here's the flight I tried to go to. Here's all the information. This is when it said it was going to go. This is when it actually left. Here was this unexpected layover we didn't think we were going to have in New Hampshire before we actually crossed the ocean. And you can actually get a really accurate picture from these real life stories about how it actually goes. And after reading several of those, I feel like my mindset kind of shifted into what to expect. Like, okay. And then I wasn't shocked when I had major delays or major like hiccups, because I've been like, oh yeah, this happens. It wasn't jarring. So that's a very helpful Facebook page to read up on as well.
About how to research and things like that. Let's talk about some like tips and tricks about, with kids. Like, let's talk about kids. Like, how can we make this experience a little bit more easy for those that are traveling with kids? Like, what has been your recommendations traveling with your kids on, because you've traveled over to 30 countries, but you've done Space A several times for some of those trips. So how did you do that with your kids?
I feel like packing, when I tell people that, I get all these crazy looks, because on Space A flights, you are allowed two 70-pound bags per person. That is the allowable luggage. But we've also seen posts on some of the terminals pages. Here, I wrote one down that I saw the other day. Attention passengers, due to aircraft limitations, only 20 passengers will be authorized checked baggage. Passengers over 20 will be authorized only carry-on. So if you brought checked baggage and you're after that 20, you're not making that flight. So definitely, if you can pack light, it also helps, because then the kids are carrying their own things and you're not carrying 27 things. But yes, packing light, you can do it. You can do it in a backpack for 30 days. Also, definitely the snacks. We talked about that before. Even on the Patriot Express flights where you're going to get 2 meals, we had an unexpected, they weren't allowed to service the meal until we were crossing the ocean, and we had to do a refuel stop in New Hampshire, and we'd already left 4 hours later than we thought. Then we sat on the tarmac in New Hampshire for 3 hours because we couldn't deplane. And so by the time we were over the ocean, it was midnight, and every single child on that plane had cried themselves to sleep. So make sure that you've got plenty of food. Don't forget the snacks. Also, one that caught us off guard was you must have closed-toed shoes with a back to get on a cargo plane. So Crocs are not they won't let you on with Crocs.
I love that. That's what I'm using for my excuse that he cannot even bring his Crocs with him to Europe.
So in Europe, we had a last-minute run to the PX in Ramstein to pick up a pair of tennis shoes, because our kid couldn't get on the plane because he had Crocs on. So make sure you remember that rule. Also, if a lot of kids nowadays, especially having sensory sensitivities, so just if your child struggles with sensory issues, make sure you're prepared for that, because the cargo flights, there's no windows. It's very loud. The temperature is not regulated. There's not comfortable seating. So make sure that you're prepared your children for those circumstances if you're not on a Patriot Express, especially. Trying to think what else with the kids. We bring our own entertainment, even if we might be on a Patriot Express. We bring the tablets and the headphones just to make sure they've got something to distract them with all of the waiting, or on a cargo flight for that 8 hours across the ocean. So.
Yeah, I love how you were like pack light. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a notoriously overpacker, because I've been stranded places. And so this trip, I was like, okay, we are going to pack only in a carry-on. And I'm going to try to do it in 2 carry-ons, so that way only my son and I are pulling the suitcases. And then we'll each have a backpack. But I was like, okay, we'll have a washer and dryer. We'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, we can do this. But I know, like, I'm just in my back of my head, I've been stranded places with only 2 outfits. And so I've always overpack, guys. Like, I'm the one that's carrying that 70-pound bag for like a 4-day trip. Like, I bring everything with me. But I was like, we're going to be going in the trains and taxis and all these things. I was like, there's no way that I could manage that with 2 kids by myself. So I was like, I have to do this. So I'm really excited to kind of push my limits. And because I'm also kind of rebuilding my wardrobe right now too. So I'm kind of trying to do that capsule thing. So I was like, just think about it that way and kind of, wear your bigger, bulkier things on the plane and then try to do all the different things. So packing light, I think, is really going to be great, especially if you plan on doing a lot of bouncing around to other cities once you get there, because you're not going to want to lug that 70-pound bag down a cobble street when you get to a certain city, and it's just not going to be fun. So definitely, I think that's a great tip. And I've been watching YouTube video, guys. There's so many amazing travel vlogs, not just about Space Day, but in general, on how to pack lightly, what you need, what you don't need. So if you haven't traveled overseas, because I'm sure there's a lot of us that haven't done that, make sure you're doing, do your research and, reach out to those who have traveled, determine is this something that's really needed? If it's not, one, don't waste your money. Don't waste carrying it around with you, because you're going to be carrying it, especially if you're going to different places.
I think people get concerned about that, is the return maybe. And you, Ashley, you have a benefit of like your husband. If you buy stuff, you can always leave it with him and he can ship it with his stuff when he moves back. But also you can, when you're in an APO, when you get back to where you're flying out of, you can mail stuff to yourself too as well. So if you're like, oh, but I picked up all this stuff and now all I have is a backpack to carry it home and I can't, you can mail yourself. An APO is going to be the same as shipping anything in the United States. It's not an extra charge. It's an extra form, but not an extra charge. And so do keep that in mind too. So I think there's a lot of people are like, I can't do that. I need to have a suitcase. That's my mom. Every time she comes, I'm like, you do not need a suitcase for things to come home. Like, we can mail it to you. It's fine. So do keep in mind that's okay. Yeah. Like, it's okay to pack light and then ship stuff to yourself as necessary.
I always joke, it's like when you have your first kid and you buy everything in the catalog, and then you have your second or third, you're like, I really just need diapers and a handful of Cheerios. Like, and you're like, that's really, you figure it out.
Yeah. The fact that you're like, handful of Cheerios and a diaper and a pack of wipes.
But the thing is, you don't believe that when people tell you that as a first-time mom. You're not going to believe that when people tell you that as a first-time traveler. Yeah. But really, I promise, like, you don't need all that stuff for sure.
And you're not traveling to a third world country. There are stores. Like, if something comes up that you're like, oh, we don't have this thing, you can buy it. It's going to be, even if you go to Japan, anywhere you go, those things are available. You're not going to be like stranded somewhere without anything that you need.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big thing. Like, you can get all those like staple things like shampoo, conditioner, any of those things that, you're not very set on, that you have to have like a certain brand or whatever. Like, you can get that while you're over there for inexpensive. And then it's less room in your bag, less worry about, whether or not it's going to pass TSA. If it isn't a carry-on, especially if you have to travel back by a commercial flight. So just, travel light. You can pick up all the different things, pack clothing that, is going to be easily washed. I'm following one girl on YouTube, and she's just like, we wash stuff in the sink and it works great. And we pack everything. And I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. But I was like, I can. Like, just have the can-do attitude that you can do Space A, and you can, it can feel like you're jumping hurdles, because it is a lot of work. Like, it's not as easy as going on your computer, selecting a flight, hitting the pay button, and then showing up 2 hours before that flight to get onto it. It's not that easy. Like, yes, that commitment, that is probably less stress, but then you have that monetary stress of like, okay, like, I'll just, for instance, like when I was looking at flights for our trip in May, it was going to be about $3,000 round trip just for our flights. And doing the Space A, even if we get stuck in a location for a day or two with the train, with taxis, it's going to be well under $1,000. And that's with us traveling up to DC. So like, that's like, me covering cost of like gas and things like that. So like, it is significantly so much cheaper to do, especially if you want to travel. And that price tag has always kind of been the deterrent of it. And that's always been one of our deterrents. It's like,
to travel.
We can't really afford flights overseas. It's just expensive. Like, it's not, especially if you're a larger family. We're only a family of 4, but that's still 4 people that you're buying trips for. And there's obviously like, I did find a really good deal on my flight that I'm going back in August, but I am going commercial this time because I'll have a little bit less time to be there. So we decided to do that. And I was able to find a flight round trip under $1,000 for myself. But I'm also taking like several layovers to make that happen, which I was totally fine with because it's just me. And I can, hang out in the airport, read my book. I'll be fine. I don't have to kind of like keep the kids entertained and stuff. So it was like, for me, like that's worth it. But like, figuring out what works best for your family is obviously number one. If it's space phase, you're just like, that seems like too much work. Cool. Put it in your back pocket when you retire. Cause I think like that's a phenomenal way. Like when you retire, you're going to have time to travel more often if you're not working, and you can utilize those things.
Yeah, I'll say over our 3 trips, our family saved over $35,000 in airplane tickets. And also a specific trip, we needed to get to Barcelona from the DC area for a cruise that we were gifted for Christmas, and decided to gamble it on Space A. And that trip would have cost us around $16,000 for our family of 8 to get to Barcelona, flying commercial airline tickets. And we had to do a bunch of crazy stuff. We flew Space A into Ramstein. There's a free medical shuttle bus that goes from Ramstein to Vicenza twice a week. We hopped on that, got down to Italy, took a train to Milan, and then flew on a budget airline from Milan to Barcelona. And we got there for a total of right around 400 euros. So $50 a person instead of $16,000 for us to get there. So yes, like you said, it's a high risk, high reward situation. Like, how inconvenienced are you willing to be to save money? And if you're willing to put in the work, you can save.
And this is not even just like to Europe, guys. Like this is to, like, you can fly to Hawaii, you can go to Japan. There are, Alaska. There's different places you can. I mean, even just flying in the US, like if you go from the East Coast to the West Coast, like there are so many opportunities. Just looking for those terminals and figuring out where their missions mostly fly, because they each fly to different locations. Some are just Europe or mainly Europe, and then other places are going to be, across the states, and then some are going to be to Asia. So it just depends on those locations and figuring that out. And I think that's where that kind of comes in. And then just knowing, like, okay, so for instance, like I said, like Charleston flies to Ramstein every once in a while, but like there's really no return flights to Charleston. So you have to but that doesn't mean it isn't going to be the case, because they can pop up at like really any time. And so just keeping an eye out for like all those things. I think that's where like the Ebby Travels site can come into play and kind of determine, like looking at the past flights and all the information that he pulls for that. And then just talking to people who have done it. Like, I think that's a huge resource, is just, find someone who's done it, pick their brain. I feel like military life in general, like, this is the theme of our season is, it's never the same story. Like, it's always going to be a different experience. Even if you've flown on Space A several times, there's probably going to be some part of that is different every single time. So you just kind of have to roll with the punches, go with the flow, have backup plan after backup plan, but like it can be a really great resource. I'm so excited. For those who are listening, I do plan to kind of document it so that way you guys can see it, because I do feel like, I know for me, like going onto YouTube, like I was trying to find things, and a lot of the information or a lot of the recent videos, there hasn't been any recent videos. Like there's been it's been like 2 years since some of them, and so kind of a lot changes in 2 years, because I know for a fact that the Space A experience is going to be very different for me from when I was a kid. I mean, you just said like closed-toed shoes is now required. That was not required. I had flip-flops on, and it was the worst decision I ever made because I was freezing. So that is really good that they make you wear closed-toed shoes, because then maybe you'll at least have socks on, and you might not freeze to death if you're on C-17. Let's see. Were there any other questions? I mean, I feel like this is just a really good way to, like we said, like have that adventure, get a different perspective on how to utilize those military benefits, because we talk about this all the time. Like there's so many benefits out there that are underutilized. Like this is a great way. What would be like one of your tips on if someone is nervous to try it? Like like, I hear you say like it's kind of great, but like if they're truly nervous, like what is your like piece of advice that you would give to them?
Well, what I tell people that take our class at Fort Belvoir, because we are local to the DC area, the easiest place to go to from the Upper East Coast is Germany. I'm like, I know people are like, okay, I just want to try it, like do a test flight, and maybe I'll just go somewhere in the US. I'm like, no. The easiest test flight is to Germany, because that's by far where the most flights are going to from the East Coast. So don't think you can do a little test flight and hop over to the West Coast from the East Coast, or hop over to Texas. Like there are flights that go there, but that's so hard to plan for. Like the easiest thing you can do to test it out is go to Ramstein for maybe just a weekend. I don't know. Like you don't have to do a long trip if you want to test out. But
Yeah. I mean, and that area in general is just such a great area. There's a lot close by. So like you could easily travel to so many locations just flying to Germany.
Exchange, because when you get there, it is a mini America. Ramstein is mini America. So you're going to get there, be surrounded by, I mean, even in the Kaiserslautern area, most people speak English. It's going to be an easy transition. So like you're not having to study German to visit Ramstein. You'll be okay. Like, so it is a really good place to go.
No. And there's just you're really close to getting on the trains. There's short trips from there that you can do if you're just going for a very short time. And I think it is such a good location to travel to other countries if that is your goal. So it's not hard. I mean, I'm pretty sure, and I would have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure there's a shuttle to Frankfurt from one of the installations around there. I don't know if you have to go over to K-Town, Kaiserslautern. I'm sorry, I'm using abbreviations. Or if there's one from Ramstein, or if it's from the Erlandstuhl. So there are ways to get there, and there's there's just like in any other installation. I'm sure if you go and post and say, hey, like we're flying in, is there anyone willing to pick us up and drop us off? You may be able to find someone who's willing to do that.
Yeah. Other resources once you get there. I mean, you can look up the USO trips, you can look up your MWR trips, and then that stuff's all pre-planned. So you can just pay for those trips and go on a bus with a bunch of other military members to other locations. So you can use those other resources that are going to be discounted trips, super easy to access, not having to plan hotels and stuff. That stuff is all like incorporated. So definitely look into that. If that's something that you want to do, like a week trip to Ramstein just to try it out, be like, okay, but what else is happening out of Ramstein? Jump on a trip with the USO. Most of their trips, especially the USO, are really cheap. So like, just go. And then that way you're surrounded still by Americans and military, like people that you're used to being around, but then you can experience things without having to do a lot of the extra planning on the back end. So
yeah, and I think we have a lot of and we'll throw them in the show notes too. There's a lot of resources out there for like space age travel, like getting discounts on hotels and tours and things like that. Like I actually had someone send me one over not long ago, and I was like, whoa, like I didn't even know this one existed. Like I was very familiar with Armed Forces Vacation Club, and this I think is like a sister site to them, but we'll put it in the show notes. That way they're all there for you guys. But this had like discounts on like cruises and all this different information, and they were really well priced. It was cheaper than like what I could find with like actually hiring a travel agent, and they can usually find pretty good deals too. So there are ways to find discounted places to go visit, discounted places to book hotels, even flights to get there from the country you're already in. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to utilize your time and make it completely worthwhile. I mean, I feel just the flight itself makes your trip worthwhile because you're saving so much money. So that money can be used to go, stay at a nicer hotel, or go on more of more trips or more tours or things like that, if that's what you're going for.
So before we hop off, I know that Allison, you mentioned it a little bit about a class that you yourself kind of help lead. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that, and then people in your area have access to that?
Sure. My husband and I just started a Space A 101 class that we offer at the USO on Fort Belvoir. We offer it about once a month. It fills up really quick. We can only take about 20 people because of room requirement, like space requirements. Usually fills up within the first 4 hours of us posting about it, if we're lucky to make it to 4 hours. But it just basically goes over a lot of what we talked about today, a little bit more detail sometimes. We show maps of kind of where the different locations to fly out of are, talk about the pros and cons of using PE versus cargo and that kind of thing. I did include in the show notes a link to the slides we use for that presentation. They're on a website format. And so that's included in the show notes. And also within that are links to a lot of the other things that Ashley shared. So there's like a link to a bunch of the good Facebook groups. There's a link to Pop and Smoke. There's a link to EV Travels that are live links on that website that we provide for the people that take our class. So nothing exciting. I mean, it's free. We just love traveling. We don't want to gatekeep the information. We want everyone to be able to experience it. So it's just kind of our way to give back to the military community up here. And we love talking about traveling and trying to encourage other people to do it. So if anyone's in the DC area, we'd love to have you come check out a class if you want more info. So
yeah, I super appreciate that you sent us all that. Yeah, like we can get all this information from hearing and listening to the podcast, but it's different to have someone sit down at the website with you and be like, hey, this is where this is where this is. I'm very visual, so I would really appreciate a class like that if I was in the area to take it. So having this slide that you sent to us is so cool that we can share that with our followers and be able to at least kind of get the similar experience as if they were to join your class and kind of have a little bit more of a hands-on aspect to the podcast. So thank you for sending us that.
Sure.
Well,
editing version of me. We had some major technical difficulties. Sorry if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see that you can hear the whole episode, but you can't see Ashley during parts of it. It was very technical problems. So we at least got through the audio. You were able to get this beautiful resource. We are so grateful for Allison coming on. There will be tons of information in the show notes. We hope that you still enjoyed the show. And if you're listening, you didn't have to notice any difference in the audio quality. So we hope that you at least got to hear some great information about the Space A travel, and that if you need anything else, reach out to one of us or Allison, and we will make sure that you have access to anything Space A. And as we like to say, Ruck Up Buttercup.
Sure. Thanks for having me.